everybody! Thank you all so much for tuning in to a virtual tour of California state parks. My name is Ashley and I am joining you from the pier here at Sea Cliff State Beach in Aptos, California, just south of Santa Cruz. The waves are crashing, it's a bit cloudy, but other than that, it's a beautiful day to bring a piece of sea cliff to all of you from the comfort of your homes. So, before we dive into what we're going to be talking about today, I wanted to give you a quick California State Parks update. As you know, California State Parks has closed all day-use parking lots to cars, and starting tomorrow there's going to be a hard closure for the following week. So that means that the parks will be closed to all access. So stay home, stay safe, remember to wash your hands, and keep helping us flatten this curve so that we can return to our state parks soon. So with that, what are we going to be talking about today? Today we are going to be talking about the story of the Monterey Bay. And to do that, I want to give you all a chance to look at the bay. Let's see if it'll focus on it. Yes, it will. And the story of the Monterey Bay is one that's filled with devastation, perseverance, recovery, and throughout the entire story, a sense of hope. So if you have ever been to Sea Cliff State Beach or any other beach along the Monterey Bay, you probably realize not only how clean the beaches are, but how clean the water is. Now the water here at Sea Cliff today is a bit gray due to the cloud cover, but on a gorgeous sunny day it is that wonderful blue. But the Monterey Bay didn't always look like that, and that's where our story begins. So let's hop into our time machines and go back to the year 1700s, when a French explorer by the name of Jean-Francois de la Pérouse arrived to the Monterey Bay much like a kid would arrive in a candy store. The bay was filled with lush kelp forests. There were lots of birds. There were lots of fish. It was teeming with life. And there was one animal in particular on the bay that La Pérouse had his eyes set on. And that was the sea otters. Now, sea otters are a marine mammal, and they're the smallest marine mammal. And unlike other marine mammals that rely on blubber to stay warm, sea otters rely on their thick fur coats. Now I happen to have some sea otter fur with me right now that I'll show you all 1 second. And at first glance, you're probably thinking, wow, that looks really soft. And yes, it does. And I'm using the back of my hand so I don't get any oils onto this fur. And this fur is so dense that it has about 1 million hairs per square inch. And to put that into perspective, that's more hair than you and I have on our whole heads combined. So, La Pérouse was aware of the sea otters because the Russians were along the west coast of North America harvesting the otters for their fur. Now, La Perouse still remained skeptical about getting involved into the fur trade, but there was another group of people, and those were the Spanish. Now, there was a gentleman by the name of Vicente Basadre who would harvest sea otters, load their fur onto empty supply boats that would go from Monterey down to Mexico. And then from Mexico, they would go down to the Philippines. And Basadre was doing this so that, and trading these otter furs so that he could get gold and silver ore, which was needed, he needed quicksilver to help extract silver and gold ore down in Mexico. So on his first trip, he harvested a little over 1,000 pelts, sent them down to the Philippines, and on the second trip, tensions began to rise between Basadre and the Philippine company. So on the second trip, the Philippine company seized all of the pelts, and instead of giving Basadre the money that he had rightfully earned, the Philippine company kept all the money for themselves. So Basadre was left empty-handed and was like, that's the last straw, and left the fur otter trade. Now, the sea otter fur trade continued on for several more years, and in 1850, the otter trade was pretty much over. Now, the hunters moved on to other trades, and as people moved on, the Monterey Bay began experiencing something. It hadn't moved on yet, and was beginning to feel that impact of there being no sea otters. Now, we know today that sea otters are known as a keystone species. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, what the heck is a keystone species? Well, I'm going to break it down for you right now. And a keystone species is an organism that has a disproportionate impact on the rest of the ecosystem when they're removed. Now you're probably like, well, that just confused me a little bit more. So let's simplify it a little bit more. I want all of you to think of an arch. A perfect arch filled in with blocks. There's that centerpiece right at the top. It's a beautiful arch. Now, as sea otters left, a couple of other animals began emerging, and those were sea urchins and abalone. And those two animals are both herbivores, meaning that they feed on plants. And so, urchins and abalones emerged from their hiding places in the rocks, crawled across the seafloor, came across a delicious snack of kelp, which forms the base of kelp forests, and would chew at the bases of them. And because there were no otters, these populations of both urchins and abalone began to explode. So that was the first impact of the Monterey Bay, and the first devastation was the loss of kelp forests and this rise of urchins and abalone eating all the kelp. Now that otters weren't the center of attention anymore, people turned to a larger animal found in the bay, and those were whales. Hang on a sec, there's a plane flying overhead. Alright, so turning to whales. And In 1845, the first whaling station was created along the coast of California by the name of somebody called Captain John Hope Davenport. Now you might have heard of Davenport, California, just north of Santa Cruz. And one whale was worth about $500 to $1,000. Now you might be thinking to yourself, that doesn't seem like a whole lot of money given the size of a whale. But to put that into a little bit of perspective, that's about the equivalent of 2 to 3 pounds of refined gold, which during the time of the gold rush, that would be something that was a good haul. So whales were being harvested for their blubber, which was rendered down into oil. And Davenport's whaling company was a fairly small one. There was a crew of about 12 people. They only had 2 boats. And in the first year, they took about 18 whales. Now, a year later, another whaling station was created, and this one was much larger. This one was able to do about 5 times the business that Davenport's company was able to do. And this company harvested about 900 whales. And about 1/3 of those were gray whales. Now, the whaling season and harvesting only lasted about 5 years. And if you know anything about gray whale migration, you know that they migrate from Alaska down to Mexico. And so if the whales were migrating, how come whaling only lasted 5 years? What happened to all of the whales? Well, gray whales were also being harvested down in Mexico. And so it was a double-edged sword for the whales. They were being harvested both in the Monterey Bay as well as in Mexico. So whaling only lasted about 5 years. So I probably brought down the mood a little bit by talking about this devastation of the Monterey Bay. But we got a sense of our first glimmer of hope towards the recovery of the Monterey Bay. So that would begin its journey back to becoming a healthy Monterey Bay. And it comes in the form by a person by the name of Julia Platt. Now, Julia Platt was born in San Francisco, California, and moved to the East Coast, where she pursued her college education in zoology. She loved the ocean, she loved being outdoors, and at that time, women were not awarded, quote, real degrees. So the college awarded her a Bachelor of Arts, which again at that time was not considered a real degree. Now, Julia was drawn to the beautiful West Coast, and mainly because it was partly due because she was born in San Francisco, so her heart might still have been there. But it was also because just across the bay in Pacific Grove, a new marine research station was being started. And that research station was called Hopkins. And Hopkins Marine Station is now run by Stanford University today. And so Miss Platt arrived to Pacific Grove with the hope of becoming a researcher at this marine station. But again, this was the time when women, was during a time when women weren't involved in science. And so unfortunately, she was denied her, a position at this research station. So she, instead of giving up, she said something along the lines of, Life isn't worth living if I can't do the work I love. So I gotta do what's next best. And so that's exactly what she did. She did what was next best to help the Monterey Bay. She turned her passion for research and became a conservationist. She became an innovative thinker, and she also began attending city council meetings. And she loved to rustle feathers with city council members. And she would go to these meetings, advocate for change, and city council members, for lack of better words, became annoyed with her and said, if you want to run everything, why don't you become mayor? So, guess what? That's exactly what she did. She became Mayor Julia Platt. And that was the beginning of more of the recovery of the Monterey Bay. Now, while Mayor Platt was getting her feet back under her as mayor, another animal in the bay was being targeted, which may come as no surprise. And this was a small animal, and that was a tiny fish by the name of sardines. Now, sardines are unlike other fish in that they glide effortlessly through the water, and they, with their mouths open, and they filter tiny plankton through their gills, so tiny plants and animals. And sardines were in peak season during mid-spring or mid-May to late summer. And sorry, there's a lot of pigeons flying around. And so sardine season was mid-spring to late summer. And to give you a perspective of how many sardines there were in the Monterey Bay at this peak time, there were more sardines than there were people on Earth. That's mind-blowing. More sardines than people on Earth. So, with all these sardines, you needed a way to keep up with the massive harvest of these sardines. And so the first canneries were created. And with canneries, you can probably imagine the smell that came with them. And so not only was the Monterey Bay being hurt by the massive harvest of these sardines, but tourism within the Monterey Bay was also taking a hit, because who wants to come to a stinky beach? I don't know about you, but personally I wouldn't want to. So a lot of these sardines were also being canned to use for food during World War I, which was going on during that time. And also in 1919, the state of California created its first Department of Commercial Fisheries to look at how the fish population was being impacted. Now, scientists realized that these fisheries were being negatively impacted, but nobody really knew what to do. And so, Mayor Platt, there's that name again, realized that she had an ocean-sized problem. But she realized that it wasn't just a problem that she could solve by herself. And so she came up with two goals to help her begin to tackle this problem. And that first goal was to reduce the amount of pollution that was happening along the Monterey Bay. And the second goal was to create these banks within the Monterey Bay that would allow habitats to heal themselves, to begin that recovery of the Monterey Bay. So she began tackling those two problems and created the Hopkins Marine Life Refuge, which paved the way for creating more protected areas along the state of California. Now, I'm standing here at Sea Cliff right now, and I'm standing within the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary is a safe place for all the animals that live here, from the tiny plankton that drift through the water to the large blue whales. It also provides a natural classroom, so I'm standing out here bringing you a piece of Sea Cliff to you all. And it also supports commercial industries such as fishing and whale watching. And so, to give you more of a perspective of the sanctuary, I have a map to show you, and let me grab that real quick. And so, let's see if I can get this into the camera all right. So this is the a satellite picture of the Monterey Bay, or the coast of California. We're right here at this red star, and what looks like a shark bite is the Monterey Bay. And within the Monterey Bay, there are lots of different habitats. There are kelp forests. There's the submarine canyon that starts offshore at Moss Landing, about 20 minutes south of here. There are rocky shores, and there's also the sandy beach, which is what I'm at right now. And so the sanctuary spans from its northern point, from about 7 miles north of San Francisco, to its southern point, which is in Cambria, which is in San Luis Obispo County. The sanctuary is filled with lots of life. There are roughly 35 species of marine mammals. So that's your whales, your dolphins, and sea otters. And there are lots of birds as well. There are pelicans and cormorants. And right now on the pier there are a lot of pigeons. I'll pan the camera around so you can see all those wonderful pigeons that are my in-person audience for today. Also at the end of the pier, we have the SS Palo Alto, which is serving as a artificial reef for all of the different animals that live underwater, from your sea stars to your sea urchins to your anemones. So, the Monterey Bay has made a miraculous recovery. And the recovery of the Monterey Bay began when people saw a bay worth saving. And so I want to leave you all with the message that no matter what your background is, no matter what your education is, when you look out on the Monterey Bay and you see it as a place worth saving, I encourage you to share your passion with other people. And all together we can help protect the Monterey Bay. So with that, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in today to this virtual tour of California State Parks. We'll be live again at 1:30 today talking about sea otters. That program is going to be geared toward 3rd through 5th graders, but anybody else is welcome to tune in. Also, remember that starting tomorrow there is going to be a hard closure on California State Parks until April 15th. So please stay home, stay safe. And I'm gonna check through the comments real quick to see if there are any leftover questions. Yes, I am tuning in from Seacliff State Beach today, and it is a beautiful day down here. Hi Beverly in Watsonville, and let's see. Alright, and thanks Pamela, thank you for tuning in, and thank you all for tuning in, and hope to see you all again at 1:30, and I'm going to leave you to enjoy the sounds of the waves. So I'm going to flip the camera around and let you enjoy the waves. So, goodbye for now.